My name is Conor McGilligan. That is Oscar Marriott. We are back with, I think we've kind of like impromptu decided that this is going to be a weekly show, but I think, Oscar, for the first time ever, I've come to the realization that after nearly probably 5-6 years, it is time to end the debrief. And I think with me and you, it's just been dead for a while, the debrief, and we've had about 4 billion different guests on it. So I think if me and you to do something a little bit more focused, it can be something that maybe the viewers can decide what the name can be. Hence why I've got
Thursday Focus.
Thursday Focus, yeah. Why not? And then
Friday would work better, but Thursday something.
Yeah, something like that. And we'll
Thursday
have,
theories.
Thursday just doesn't quite roll off the tongue, does it?
I'm just going to do a back Letizia and come up with all sorts of different theories. No, I'm not really.
Yeah, so insert other name here. We've got the same with Gabe as well, Oscar, because Gabe can only do certain days now with his work and he can only do certain recordings. So I'm trying to get, it's not really the hard line anymore because that was a live show. That was very to the point. So now we're doing a bit more of a tamer edition for about 20-30 minutes. So hello everybody in the chat as well. It's a bit of an impromptu one, this. We'll get like a regular schedule going, but today we're going to be speaking about Jayden Bogle, bit of transfer interest, which I think is going to be quite good to get into with Oscar. Also, I want to kind of touch on some of the bits that Farke was talking about in his press conference. I think Facundo Buonanotte is quite an interesting conversation. Willie Nyonto, Okafor, all this sort of good stuff. We're going to touch on maybe Aston Villa predicted 11s as well. And a certain midfielder being called up and apparently been heavily speculated to be in the German World Cup squad. So first of all, mate, how's it going?
All good, mate. All good. I had a lovely weekend in Antwerp, watching the Antwerp darts on Thursday, and then enjoying the lovely Antwerp. Fantastic city and a great time, to be fair. A lot of drinking, but all good, mate. All good. I'm today dressed like Tony Pulis. I don't know if you noticed. I've got the full club shop on.
It's like a mix of Tony Pulis and Bryn Law.
Brynlow, I'll take that. It's an interesting combination. That is a very interesting combination. That one, yeah, I can see the Brynlow. Actually, I understand that one. But
mate, you might have to. We've had some feedback already. You need to check if that mic's on. It doesn't sound like it's
not
on.
Connecting. Are we not connecting? Right, I shall check, mate.
No, you're all right. We'll get on to some comments. Let's Go Boy says, it's a bit. Nice haircut, Connor. Honestly, mate, I need to. Do you know what it is, Curry? I'm trying to grow it out, and I'm slowly realising that I don't know how people do this. I've no idea how people do this. Like, I don't know what to do with it. It's too long now, so then I put it in like a bit of a slick back, but then it looks ridiculous. And then I try to have it down at the front, and then I've just got my hair down here. I don't know what the hell to do with it. It's just everywhere. I have about 7 billion different haircuts, as Oscar knows, and I'm trying to grow it out. I just can't. It's getting on my wick. It's doing my head in right now. So, yeah. Connor, it's your mic. Oh, wow.
You seem okay on my end, though.
Yeah, this is Oscar. This is where you need to help me out here, mate.
This is interesting. It's normally me.
It's my mic. It is my mic as well. Wow.
Is that a little bit better, everyone? Can you hear me a bit differently there, Oscar? Is that a little bit better?
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, you don't sound that much different.
Yeah, you're not a good co-host.
You can tell who the technical one is between the two of us.
Yeah, that's it. Just let us know, guys, if that's all right in the chat. Anyway, so anyway, if you haven't heard what I was just putting out there, anyway, it's we're going to be speaking about transfer bits and this, that, and the other. I wanted to obviously touch on where we are at this moment in time, mate, and we'll get into Villa in just a little bit, of course, but. How are you feeling about Leeds right now? Are you confident? Obviously, you've got Forest right now beating Fenerbahce away, which is quite interesting in itself. But I guess we're looking at that competition, aren't we, Oscar? And we're probably thinking to ourselves, you know what? Get a little bit further, go a little bit further in the competition. And don't get me wrong, a win away in Fenerbahce is a nice little win. But I guess that's probably a good thing for Leeds at this moment in time, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I think you've got to look at the positives. I think more games at this stage of the season is never a good thing. Obviously, Forest might point to momentum being built. Obviously, I think it's the first game under Vitor Pereira. It'll be interesting how that one kind of plays out for Forest. Obviously, we know with Tottenham as well, they've made a big change. Whether you'll be able to tell pretty quickly how that one's going to go at Tottenham, if they're going to sort of get themselves out of it quickly, or if it's going to be a pretty tough couple couple of weeks for them. But it's one of those with Leeds at the minute. It's impossible not to look at what the other teams are doing. As much as it's all about kind of focusing on ourselves, you kind of got to be looking at what the competition's doing, because we kind of mentioned last week it could be more than 40 points this week. We've come to the realisation that this season it could be another West Ham 2003, which was the last time it was more than 40 points for a team to go down. I think they got 42 that season. And yeah, they went down the last game of the season. So it would be very long brand for Leeds. We've had this before trying to get out of the Championship, where we've had a certain amount of points. Every other year it's been enough, and that particular year it wasn't. So it is interesting from that point of view. In terms of where I am at with Leeds, I think, to be fair, pretty similar to the last couple of weeks, really. I think cautiously optimistic. I like where the gap is at this moment in time. I like the way we're playing. Last couple of games have not been so easy, but I think Birmingham in the Cup was never going to be an elite level performance. I think it's just the nature of being a Premier League team, fighting against relegation in the sort of latter bits of the FA Cup. I think that's just the reality. You just try and get yourself through it, and that's what we did. Chelsea was a messy performance as well. So I think that Forest game is a truer reflection of what our level is. I wouldn't say confident against Villa. I think Villa is going to be a tough one to get a result out of, but I think at the very least, we will put a show on. We will show what we're about, and we will cause Villa problems at times in the game. So, yeah, at the minute, I think we do need a couple more wins on the board. I think, obviously, the unbeaten run, or the amount of games we've gone unbeaten, compared to other teams, is impressive, but ultimately it's wins that get you out of this mess. It's wins, not draws, that get you out of it. So, I'm not getting too carried away, but I'm also fairly happy with where I think we're above where I thought we'd be at this stage of the season. No question about that.
Well, there's conversations as well about Anton Stach being in the World Cup squad for Germany, and I guess him coming back for this game in particular is absolutely massive. I know Farke touched on Pascal Struijk as well, and Dan James, which are really massive positives as well, because it's just obviously with James, you get a little bit more of a runner, don't you? I quite like the idea maybe with DJ as a little bit of a runner. I've made this comparison before, Oscar, when I've been looking at Ollie McBurney at Swansea with Dan James, and just that combination and the synergy that they were able to really get together consistently. You had a man in the middle who was a focal point, very good in the air, very good movement-wise as well. And then you had DJ who was able to pick him out every single time, and they were just a match made in heaven. I'm thinking to myself, just in and behind that fullback, I wonder if we're going to be able to I've got a bit of an echo on my end, mate, now. Does that mean?
Yeah, little echo, yeah.
You got, hold on, have you got me on in the background?
No.
You got a YouTube thing on?
No.
Okay, weird, just went off. Anyway, so I mean, it's just kind of one of those things what I'm thinking at the minute when it comes to DJ and Dominic Calvert-Lewin. There could be like a really decent partnership there, especially with DJ sort of hitting the byline and putting it across the box. It's all just about movement and timing, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, the Bernie Dan James is a very, it's a very fair comparison. I think there's similarities in playing style. I think Dan James is a far better player now than what he was at Swansea. And I think McBurney obviously is nowhere near DCL's level, but obviously different levels, etc., etc. But I think you can sort of say there's some comparisons to sort of very, very early. I'm not talking about the players they became, but in terms of very early Premier League era, sort of Tony and Mbeumo. I think very early Premier League era, when they first came into the league, a little bit lesser known and maybe a little bit more rash in their decision making. But in terms of how it works as a partnership, I can see the likelihoods kind of thing of how that kind of is what tends to succeed at this level. In terms of big striker and quite mobile sort of outlet around him kind of thing. That can possibly work there. And as well, DCL Okafor as well can work in a similar way, potentially DCL Nonto. I personally think that's more the direction we should be looking to go in.
What's that?
In terms of big striker and someone running off him, I really do think we need that pace.
So does that come back to that? Because we're going to get into this conversation anyway in the next few weeks. But going to a two up top, are you? Because I think a lot of people are focusing on the system, aren't they? And they're focusing a hell of a lot on formations. With Dan James coming back into the picture and us having this conversation about Nonto as well, being in this offensive conversation. does that move Leeds open to a little bit more of kind of a winger and a focal point, as in like maybe two wingers and a focal point, instead of it just, because I think a lot of us still maybe seem to think that it's going to go to a two up top. I'm not sure we'll see that again. I think that was just almost a moment in time post Chelsea and a little bit of City.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of alternated, between 3-5-2 and sort of like 3-4-3, 3-4-2-1, whatever you want to call it. It's two tens effectively playing off DCL in that kind of sense. Certainly Brendan Aronson in that kind of sense. But yeah, 3-5-2 we've seen a lot less of. And I personally think that is the system we should move to. I personally think in terms of what Farke wants in that midfield to start with, in terms of Ampadu and Gruev, and of course I know Gruev is one who splits opinion, but I think what Farke wants is just two constant presences as a double pivot. He wants that constant. He knows where they are going to be on the pitch. He knows not going to go off wandering, which, as much as I think Longstaff and Stach are better players than Gruev, I don't really see there's much argument for that. I do just think they're better players than Gruev, but Gruev, I suppose, is more positionally disciplined.
Mm-hmm.
Gruev very rarely gets caught out of position. I guess you could argue because he's not the most mobile. He doesn't tend to kind of drift. He tends to stay in the same areas just so he can react to what's happening around him. I just think Farke will stay with that, for the foreseeable. And then I personally play Anton Stach as a box-to-box kind of player, in terms of where sometimes he's popping up as a 10, sometimes he's linking in to make a midfield free, sometimes he's maybe drifting out onto that right-hand side, which we kind of saw him do before his injury against Arsenal. I thought he's probably our best player on that day against Arsenal, where he kind of caused a couple of problems in between the lines against Arsenal. I think Stach's our best player. So for me, I think Stach alongside Ampadu, I'm not quite sure on that. I think it kind of limits Stach's sort of influence going forward, because we know how we want that midfield two to stay in position, to allow the wing backs to push forwards. Whether it's 3-4-3 or 3-5-2, it doesn't really matter. It kind of the same ideas there, where the wing backs have got to be able to push forward at all times.
It's going over a press, isn't it? It's going over a press from our...
Yeah, exactly.
But I do think, though, I don't know if I'm reading this a little bit differently, and maybe I am, but I guess under Farke, we kind of went for and moved away from the two up top. But I do think for maybe 3 or 4, maybe even 5 games, Leeds were bypassing the press a little bit more. Maybe that was the influence of Yaka Beale, because I feel like Beale goes a hell of a lot longer, almost just in his individual play out from the back. I feel like maybe it's systematically embedded in like Strauch and Rodon to go a little bit, shorter and to build up that way. Whereas Beale, it felt like he had a bit more variance in his play out from the back. And I just wonder if that's an instruction from Daniel Farke to go beyond the press, because I think you see in Leeds, and I think you even saw this against Birmingham, where they were pressing us really highly and they were quite aggressive in that press, and Leeds was still trying to play out from the back. So I wonder if, obviously stylistically we're not gone with the 2 men up top, but maybe the ideas are being formulated now a little bit more in and around us playing out from the back, which kind of is against what we're all kind of maybe craving, I guess. But is this team technically good enough to do that anyway? Maybe they are.
Yeah, I think certainly when someone like a Stach comes back into the team, I think Strauch is crucial. If you want to play out the back, you've got to have Strauch in the team for me. I understand Strauch. I think it's a bit bizarre how he does still split opinions so much, because I think this season, you look at certainly the second bit of the season, maybe when we're playing the back 4, you can maybe question Strauch a little bit in that kind of sense. But I think switch to a back 3. I actually think Strauch probably benefited the most out of all our centre backs in terms of that shift. I think that Strauch to Goodmanson link up, I think it's really important for that left hand side, because Gruev isn't the most progressive midfielders. I think that's probably putting it lightly. I think that's putting it very lightly in terms of Gruev. It's not his kind of skill set. He kind of keeps it very simple.
Glad you've said it. I get hammered for any time I say it.
But you need Strauch and Goodmanson to kind of make things happen on that left-hand side in terms of creativity and build-up. Gruev won't give the ball away much, but he also won't bring it forward very much. I think Ampadu on the other side is a little bit more self-sufficient on that right-hand side, in terms of Ampadu can play the ball forward. Bogle can push up. Rodon can roam a little bit. Maybe not the best at playing out the back particularly, but I think it's all about balancing this Leeds United team, whether it's a back 3, back 4, 3-4-3, 3-5-2, whatever system we play. I think it's all about the balance to it as well. So I think Strauch is critical if you want to play out the back, and I think Stach is as well, because Stach is, for me, our best player at getting on the ball and turning and just trying to drive at players. I think that is something Stach, I think, maybe Aronson as well. Aronson's obviously done it pretty well this season too. But I think Stach, you get that consistency kind of thing. The decision-making for Stach's going to be a lot cleaner than what it is from Aronson. I think Aronson, it can be quite messy at times. But that's the thing. I'm talking about 3-5-2, or 3-4-3, whatever we want to talk about. Is that Farke is going to have to drop one of Aronson or Gruev for that to happen? And at this moment in time, I don't think that is going to happen. I think Aronson, DCL will probably be their front two, or whatever you want to put it as, or however you want to put it. I do not see Gruev and Aronson coming out of the team at this moment in time. But I personally think the ceiling of this team is Stach having a totally free role behind the front two or a front three. I think that's personally where this team is at its very best. I think Stach's our best player. Certainly the player with the highest ceiling.
When you're looking at that midfield dimension now, then what do you do with Tanaka long term?
Long term, Tanaka's still got a place in this Leeds team for me. There's no question about that for me. Whether we play a 4-3-3, whatever system we play, for me, our best midfield. If we're talking about the short term, I can understand why we're just trying to get through the next couple of weeks and just stay up at this moment in time and just have that continuity. But for me, longer term, it's Ampadu sitting, Tanaka on the left, Stach on the right. That's the way I see it.
I know me and you gas him up a hell of a lot when it comes to Tanaka, and I think people, for whatever reason, have seem to forget how good and how important Tanaka's been. And I think it's about of confidence at the minute. I think he's really struggling with those lack of minutes that me and you have spoken about before in terms of substitutes and rotation, maybe not getting as many minutes to build up match fitness. I think people maybe forget how important and vital match sharpness and fitness actually is, not just training. You have to be in a match environment to be able to gain that sort of momentum in games. And I just wonder now, Oscar, I know what you're saying about your team. Mm-hmm. I think Farke... Maybe. I'm
not necessarily saying that's what's going to happen, but I would say Tanaka's a Premier League footballer for me. I would genuinely say that.
Yeah, I can't see it. Like you say, I think there's too many, and I get it from Farke's perspective because he probably thinks to himself, I need players in and around who are maybe more physically adaptable, maybe players who have more pressing intensity in that midfield, and obviously you need some physical players in there like Ampadu and Stach as it is. And I feel like Tanaka just falls out of that void at the minute, or falls into the void of maybe being one of those who surplus to requirements is very, very difficult to say for me because I absolutely love Al Tanaka. But I just wonder, as a 27, 28-year-old lad, I just wonder where his place is at Leeds United. And I can't imagine it's going to go beyond this year, especially when Leeds might be able to cash in when his stock is relatively high, which I would see as a massive shame. And I know you would too, but I just don't see, because I think Leeds are going to have to be very similar to what we are right now for probably a couple of years now, 2 or 3 years, where we're going to have to adapt. Finishing 17th, if we do stay up, is still going to be seen as like a trophy for the next 2 or 3 seasons. Think Brighton and how long that happened with them. And I just think to myself, if it is Farke and if Farke is still in charge, I can't see Tanaka working at all at Leeds United. I don't see him getting minutes.
Yeah, I agree. I think, this is certainly a fair one to say. I think if we have a system that works now, I think we probably will stick with it next season. But I would say you probably do need to constantly adapt with the Premier League. I think the league changes all the time. I think you'll see a lot of the teams, if we do stay up, the 3 teams that come up this season will follow what Wolves and Sunderland have done. They will go for physicality midfield. And all of a sudden then you have less of a kind of a USP in the team kind of thing. I think our USP at the minute is that physicality we have in the team combined with some good experience across the board there as well. Maybe not so much in the Premier League, but good experience in terms of Bogle and Stach at playing in a top 5 league in Europe. So it's interesting from that point of view. You say the same about Nonto, question marks there. What's Nonto's sort of medium-term future at the club? Not even long-term. We're talking medium-term here. Tanaka, it's the same. You can say it about a couple of other players, potentially a Dan James maybe if he doesn't get over these injuries. You could say that about
as well. Physicality does comprise of things like speed, doesn't it? Yeah. Agility, endurance. Physicality isn't just a thing where it's all about brute force.
No, not at all.
It does take into consideration these other, attributes, and that's where you're looking at maybe the likes of Brendan Aronson. And people might say, well, he's not physical. Technically, he is. He's got a lot of these tendencies that physical, the umbrella of being physical is where, Aronson, like when we're talking about agility, speed, endurance, it's kind of where he thrives in a sense, isn't it?
Exactly that. And I think if you go from like the Farke first season of the Championship to the Farke second season, and of course a lot of it was kind of enforced on us with the fact that Gray, Rutter and Somerville left, I think Farke started to adapt there, not to the extreme level it is now in terms of physicality, but you kind of saw with some of the recruitment, the players we brought in to replace the likes of Rutter, Somerville, Gray. In terms of Brendan Aronson going into that 10, for example, instead of Jorginho Rutter, in terms of to back up the press, for example. You kind of saw the, for example, Largi Ramazani come in instead of Crescencio Somerville. Okay, Ramazani didn't keep his place in the team, but the idea was, a more sort of pacier, sort of wide threat rather than a ball to feet, sort of creative winger in that kind of sense. So that was interesting. So you kind of saw changes across the board. Jayden Bogle, for example, coming in for Archie Gray, more of a traditional sort of conventional fullback, rather than Archie Gray playing as sort of like a midfielder at right back, inverting into the midfield when needed, kind of thing. We kind of saw that change, from an idealist. I thought Farke was quite idealistic in that first season, and then the second season you kind of saw the adaptations. Of course, a lot of it was enforced on us, but you're kind of seeing a slow kind of sort of move towards this. I think now we're kind of at that point where you kind of see what Farke wants from his team at this level. He's kind of seeing what he didn't have at Norwich and what he has got now, and why there's such a big difference in terms of points, win percentage, etc., etc. All the performance metrics are so heavily weighted towards this being the better route. So it's interesting from that point of view. And for me, look at Tanaka. I think the bigger issue of Tanaka is the role rather than him himself physically. I don't think Tanaka's lightweight, for example. I think that's quite a harsh analysis. I think last season in the rough and tumble of the Championship, you saw Tanaka pull it out about quite a bit, in terms of putting big tackles in, backing up the press quite a lot. And that's part of where the issue comes with Tanaka. I think he's a very tenacious footballer off the ball. I'm not going to say he's some kind of pressing monster or anything like that, or a monster off the ball, but he does back up his technical quality with, really good work rate off the ball. And you kind of see this season, our midfielders don't quite have that same kind of license to join the press. We don't really press as high, in the Premier League compared to what we do in the Championship.
I think he's been caught a few times on the ball as well, Oscar.
Of course, there's that. Less time on the ball's a factor. I think a couple of the goals as well, if we're having it right, if we're going on the balance side of things, Tanaka has been culpable for a few goals. I think
it's keeping up with play, isn't it? It's keeping up with play.
Well, there's two goals I always look back to. I look back to the Szoboszlai for the 3-2 against Liverpool that we drew 3-3. I remember Tanaka losing Szoboszlai very early in that move. I think we didn't actually defend that move particularly badly. It was a great Liverpool move, and Tanaka's lost Szoboszlai at the end of it. And then I look back at the goal a week later. I think Tanaka did start that game where Jordan Henderson scored. I remember Tanaka, I think, lost Henderson quite early in that move. I think it was the Henderson goal. It was certainly a goal we conceded around then. And it feels like, to me, that was a big turning point for Tanaka in this Leeds team. In terms of, as much as I think Tanaka is a far better footballer than Ilya Gruev, and I don't want to have too much of a go at Ilya Gruev, because Ilya Gruev, I think, looks better at Premier League level than what he did in the Championship because of the qualities he offers in that kind of sense. But in terms of Farke's system, I understand it. I get it. I mean, look, we don't have to go back too far with Farke. I've already mentioned Norwich. He had Kenny McLean playing over Billy Gilmore, for example. Yeah, that didn't work, by the way. That worked horrendously badly in the Premier League. But we've seen this before with Farke. He's not too bothered by the technical qualities in midfield. He just wants reliability in midfield. For a Farke team, it's always going to be about both boxes rather than between.
You've got me on a fantastic segue there, mate. So just,
I know, that's a heck of a seg. I never thought for 1 minute I'd be mentioning Kenny McLean in a one Leeds video.
Oscar, with you, we never know what names are going to be popped out.
You just don't know, do you? Anything,
But Jason said, if we stay up, do you think Farke will bring in players to move back to his preferred formation, or stick with the current formation and bring in better players? Oscar, short answer for that, mate, if you can.
For me, it depends on who's available. I don't think we've seen the end of the back four necessarily. I still think a back four can work. I genuinely do still think a back four can work, but it's not the best approach with this group of players. I think you've got to add certainly at least one more winger to make a 4-3-3 work. I think you can't just rely on Okafor to hold the width on one side and things like that. Maybe another midfielder. There's a couple more signings needed for a 4-3-3 to properly work for me.
Yeah, 100%. Guys, let's rack these likes up as well. There's more than enough of you in the building. We've got 74 likes. Let's rack that up as well. So I wanted to touch on Facundo Buonanotte, mate. So some of the quotes that we've seen today from Daniel Farke, it was, look, we know with Facundo that it's, I've always felt a bit uneasy about it. It's just not ever been a signing where I've looked at, I've got excited, I got giddy about it. Of course I did. Yeah, and it was one of those signings where I thought to myself, do you know what? That might be a little bit of X factor for Leeds United, and it's a very different profile to what we've got in the squad. I thought it might be utilised between the lines a little bit on the right, maybe even in the 10. And then we just saw that performance at Birmingham, and then he was hooked at half time. I thought he was pretty decent against Everton when he came on. I was there. I thought some really nice little deft touches, and he was getting about play quite nicely. And yeah, anyway, Farke mentioned that he's spoken about loan players and permanent players quite a lot, and this is what he said today. He said Farke has mentioned that expectations and excitement around a signing were always prevalent, but he did not expect a fast start from a player who's struggled for consistent minutes. Farke said, "This is a message I gave him when he arrived. We haven't signed him to improve our 11 straight away. We signed him to improve our depth in the squad. We let Jack go out on loan and Harry go out on loan. We spoke openly with Facundo about it. We want to make sure we hold the pressure high on our other options. We just like his potential." I told him, "I don't write you off after one half. I was expecting this." He also said, "It's never easy." He also said that if Buonanotte instantly improved the team, Leeds would probably need to purchase an attacker like him in the future at the cost of 30-40 million. It's never easy. We give you the stage, support, and arm around the shoulder. We don't expect you to cut this league into pieces. It is step by step. If it works out, great. If not, for both sides, it's not a big risk. He didn't have his best game in the FA Cup game, but it's also a bit realistic. If you bring in a player who's rarely played a game, this is what happens. He is in a challenging position. So I guess my point, mate, initially with that, and I did it in a video a little bit earlier on, but I just thought to myself, like, if it is just depth, then he's going to be cold off the bench, because we kind of know with Farke, like, that's how it's going to be. It's been the same with like Nonto. It's been the same quite a lot of the time with Longstaff. I know Longstaff has come back relatively recently, but with Tanaka as well, it's kind of sparing minutes. We've seen it, last season even, haven't we, with like Ramazani and Joseph. It's very, very...
Go back to Connor Roberts.
Yeah.
And you can go back that far.
Well, that's what I mean. It's very small amounts of minutes. So I guess that's my... If I knew Farke was going to... If he was talking like that with Buonanotte and saying, "Look, if you get given your chance, brilliant. If you don't, if you get given your chance and you don't quite take it, fair enough." I think how I just look at this is, he's mentioned that he's a loan signed a couple of times now, which I do wonder if Farke actually likes that. And I don't think he is. I think he's made that pretty clear. Number two, he's obviously laid that gauntlet down. But will Facundo Buonanotte get enough minutes, or is it going to be these minutes that we've seen a lot of the rotation players get at Leeds, where it's sort of max 8 to 10 minutes at points? You might get 15 if you're lucky, but 8 to 10 minutes for some of them who maybe aren't the favourites. Favourites being maybe like Gruev or whoever, maybe Aronson if he's on the bench, which has rarely happened. And I guess I kind of just keep going back to it and thinking, what really was the point? And is it just kind of a depth signing? But then Farke went on to say, there is Aronson, Okafor, James, and Nonto all ahead of him. So is it really depth signing with Dan James back into the picture?
Yeah, exactly. That's the big question for me. For me, I don't really see. If I'm being totally honest, I'd love to be proven wrong here, and it's not about my opinion of Buonanotte as a player. I don't think he'll play a 90 for us. I don't think he'll play a 90-minute match for Leeds United. It feels horrible to say that, especially as he's only sort of 3 weeks into his Leeds career. I don't think it's anything to do with the talent level of Buonanotte per se. I think it's to do with the fact that I don't think Aronson and Buonanotte can work in the same team. I don't think the 2-10, two out-and-out 10s really works in modern football, especially in the Premier League with the way it is now. I think you do need, if you're going to play a 3-4-3 and one's plays to the 10, like we have seen with Aronson and Okafor, I think you've got to have one natural out-and-out winger. I really do believe that. And I think it will be James or Nonto or Okafor who plays, out-and-out wingers. I just don't see how that will happen. And I don't see Brendan Aronson coming out of the Leeds team anytime soon. I'm not necessarily saying he should do. What I'd say, two things on the game on Sunday. Two things. And Farke kind of alludes to both of them. I think the first one I'd say is I think any number 10 being put in the team and the way the game was on Sunday would have struggled. I really do believe that. Unless I'm not talking your Cole Palmers and things like that. I'm not talking that level, but I'm talking any realistic 10 of around our level would have struggled on Sunday because we weren't able to build up play. We weren't able to get the number 10 in good areas. We could not really get past the halfway line in terms of in the build-up. When we did try and go long as an option to get around the press, Metcha, I've kind of already mentioned before, I don't like Metcha as a lone striker at all.
I think
Metcha, it's not quite as bad as what Perot is as a lone striker, but it's not far off. It's certainly closer to that than what it is to Dominic Calvert-Lewin. In a two, I think Dominic Calvert-Lewin and Mecha works really well. Or coming off the bench, I think Mecha works quite nicely. But in a game like that, there was no hold-up play. There was no bringing the 10 or the two wingers. I mean, to be fair, if we're having it right, I thought Nantes and Okafor were as bad as what Buonanotte was on Sunday. I really do believe that. And I'm not blaming them two either. I'm not blaming any of the three involved in that kind of game. I just think the way the game was, I do think it was one of them where it was going to be a bit disjointed. I don't think that was the game where you judge Buonanotte. If you go back to the start of the season, Okafor at Sheffield Wednesday, Longstaff at Sheffield Wednesday, Biol at Sheffield Wednesday, Bornau at Sheffield Wednesday. If you had gone just off their performances, they probably wouldn't have played another game this season, to be honest. And that is the kind of situation. Longstaff has an absolute shocker in that Sheffield Wednesday game, and then put a man of the match game in against Newcastle 3 or 4 days later. I just don't think you can judge too harshly when there's so many changes on Buonanotte there. And yeah, I think that's a big thing. I think the second thing is that not only had we signed Buonanotte in August rather than January, I think this signing probably had double the chance of being successful, or double the chance, of being successful overall. I think the fact is he didn't play much in the second half of last season for Leicester. That's more because Ruud van Nistelrooy, for whatever reason, thought that Jordan Ayew would be a better option than Buonanotte. I mean, that is just wow. I mean, you saw how that kind of went for Ruud van Nistelrooy. Anyway, another name I didn't think I'd be bringing into this. But if you go to Chelsea, for example, Buonanotte hardly played the first bit of the season, so he's kind of had a year. It's almost like a player coming back from injury after a year kind of thing in terms of fitness levels. It's not like far off that, in terms of they always need time to build up. I don't think it's any different for Facundo, to be honest, in terms of that situation. I personally would like to see him involved more. I don't think he has done enough to be a starter so far, which is fair enough. I do think maybe Okafor, maybe Dan James are probably better options if you're playing two up front.
Can you even see him getting like 25, 30 minutes in a game, or like 20 to like
he'll come 15, off the bench 20? A few times. I think he will. But I can't even see. Yeah, I think if he comes off the bench, it'll be 5-10 minutes. I'm not knocking Farke, by the way, because this is a signing that should have happened in the August, really. And if we're being totally brutally honest, if Buonanotte had made the decision to come to Leeds in the first place, he could have saved himself a lot of hassle, really. You can't blame Farke too much, in that case. A player that turned us down last summer, and let's have it right, he did turn us down for that Chelsea move. I'm not blaming Buonanotte for that, but you also can't have your cake and eat it, in terms of you can't suddenly expect that, Farke's going to roll out the red carpet and say you're straight in the team. I never thought it'd be the case anyway, but does that make sense what I'm saying there?
Well, something to bear in mind is as well, it wouldn't have surprised me if when Buonanotte, because he was so close to signing, if you remember, so close, pretty much in the building, it wouldn't have surprised me, like we've heard with Dominic Calvert-Lewin in particular, if Farke's got on the phone and spoken to him and they've had a conversation. He said, look, this is how you're going to be in my plans. And then for at the last minute, someone like Facundo Buonanotte to then leave, it's not like Farke will be teaching him a lesson or anything like that. And I don't think that.
No, I don't think that. But
there will be something where Farke is thinking, well, no, you don't just come in now when I've got this kind of rhythm in the team, and then you don't suddenly just come in and start. And it sounded like from what he was saying today, it's been pretty much leveled out at him that you're going to have to fight. And maybe it was a case of Buonanotte not really having that many more options at this moment in time in January in terms of like a top level club coming in for him. So yeah, let's get into a few comments, mate. Effortless French says Farke will keep 5 at the back. Nonto, James, Peru, Tanaka to be sold. Possible Bornau and Perry by GK, CB, new physical. Yeah, we're doing summer chat already. Sujal says to give Farke some credit, he does somehow develop players, so maybe he really does know what he's doing with Buonanotte. Alessandro says Farke is a risk-averse manager and Buonanotte is a risky player. I think you could tell that, couldn't you? I think it was.
Yeah, there's a few times when Buonanotte gets on the ball and
I do sometimes think we need that. Sometimes you do need that.
But
I guess it's picking your zones in the pitch where you do that. And I think there was a couple of times on the halfway line where he got robbed, and then Leeds are in a very precarious position when he tries to like nutmeg Doyle and Doyle nicks it off him, and then it's back to the wall,
worth mentioning as well that Stach came up the team at Leeds when you kind of turned the ball over quite a lot, trying to be like the main creative force of the team. I think there was a time when Stach was like top of the chances created, but he was also turning the ball over quite a lot. We were conceding on transitions. Think back to, like, say, Tottenham and Burnley. But I think the thing with Buonanotte is, at the time in August, Brendan Aronson hadn't started the league game for Leeds at that point.
No.
So in that theory, Aronson hadn't done what he's done in that first half of the season, and Buonanotte is probably ahead of Aronson in the pecking order at that time. But I think now, we see Aronson's form. I still think Aronson's playing well. I'm not sure he should be quite the guaranteed starter that he is.
No,
I think there's certain games that don't suit Brendan Aronson very well, and I think there's certain games that don't suit the front three in general. Other than I think Dominic Calvert-Lewin is the only one of the front three or front two who should be a guaranteed starter week in, week out. Because I think any game, Dominic Calvert-Lewin is our best striker. Our best option as a striker, categorically, is the best option. But I think other games will suit Dan James more. Others will suit Aronson more. Others will suit Buonanotte more. Others will suit Okafor more. I think that is just how things are. But yeah, I don't see that situation changing. And I don't necessarily think Buonanotte is the answer to all our problems. If there are problems, I don't think he's necessarily the answer to it. Yeah, it's one of those. I just think with Buonanotte, Tanaka, without being too harsh, they've got to do something they've got to produce something off the bench to get into this Leeds team. And whether you think that's too harsh on them, that is just the reality. And to be fair, if you look at the way this team's been managed this season, you've kind of seen this approach work well with other players, in terms of they have produced good form. You have to remember, Calvert-Lewin, before he went on this run, was behind Mecha. Mecha started 2 or 3 games. I think it was 3 or 4 games, actually, where Calvert-Lewin came out the team. And then Calvert-Lewin had to really work to get back into the team. So I don't necessarily mind this approach. I don't think, listen, I'm not going to say Daniel Farke is a complete manager. I don't think he is. I think there is weaknesses to Daniel Farke's management where when you do go on a losing run, it's very easy to point those weaknesses out. Let's have it right. But I think in general, I can kind of see what the reasoning is with Buonanotte at this moment in time.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we need to get a fair bit in. I've just realised that we're already on 40 minutes, so we need to get a fair bit in here. There's a bit of conversation on the waves here as well on Jayden Bogle and Liverpool. Apparently, Bogle was asked about the interest, which is stumped up online. Apparently, an inquiry was made. And Bogle's just said he's going to focus on his football. I think that the big thing here is it might not be Liverpool, but it has been Everton at the beginning of the season as well. And in January, there's a lot of rumours around Jayden Bogle. This is a man who's going to have a hell of a lot of interest, isn't it, in the summer? And it's kind of one of those really where Leeds have got to brace themselves. Obviously bringing him in for £5 to £7 million. We've got to brace ourselves for some serious interest. But until that point, we've just got to enjoy him. He's my MVP this season, mate. I think he's been absolutely outrageously good for Leeds United.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with Bogle is, I don't want to sound like I'm downplaying Bogle because I just always thought he'd step up to this level. I never believed that he wasn't good enough for the Premier League. I think second half of last season, I think he was definitely our best player. Second half of last season, I think he was at least a level above the rest of the squads. And that's not being disrespectful because the squad played at a high level, but he was 9, 10 out of 10, literally. Genuinely, I think every game between January and May of the back end of last season, he was probably our best player. Genuinely, he was that good at that point. So I was never really worried that he wouldn't make the step up. He's been as good as he expected him to be, and sometimes even better than what I expected. And that's the reality. If you're going to be successful at this level, it's a good sign almost if you're struggling to keep players. It's never a good sign if you're a steady Premier League team and no one wants your players, kind of thing, because eventually you feel like the quality gap needs to be bridged at that point. So, it's not just going to be Bogle. I think Stach potentially at his age. The thing is, we're signing
World Cup as well.
When you sign 26, 27-year-old players, there's always the risk of this because it's their last chance of, say, a top 6 move. Jacobiol as well, maybe. I don't want to list too many players, but with Bogle specifically, you can see why with Liverpool. You can see why he's solid defensively. In terms of in the build-up play, you can see how it's worked with Jayden Bogle. In terms of interchanging with Szoboszlai, etc., etc. Canate, it'll be interesting from that point of view. What Liverpool do specifically seeing him, and Liverpool have got form for this in terms of signing players from teams that lower down the table. Obviously Andy Robertson signed from Hull, Van Dijk from Southampton at the time, Sadio Mane from Southampton. They have got history for doing this, Liverpool, in terms of if they think there's a good price to be had. Kirkes as well at Bournemouth. You kind of forget as well. So it's interesting from that point of view. I'm not sure if it would be Liverpool personally. I think Frimpong is probably still going to be their go-to at this moment in time. But, certainly Bogle, you could see it. I still think genuinely, if there's one or two injuries to the English right backs in terms of Alexander Arnold or Reece James, very possible they could pick up an injury between now and the World Cup. It's not beyond the realms that I'm not saying Bogle would necessarily be on the plane, but he'd certainly be in the conversation of the next sort of group of right backs who Thomas Tuchel could pick from. He would be definitely up there, certainly on current form. Probably in a similar sort of category to Calvert-Lewin. If there's any injuries in the striker front, so it's definitely a case that Jayden Bogle, now 26 this year, I think he's 26 this year. He's probably at an age where, if he does want to step up to the top six, we've got to kind of accept if the interest is there, it's going to be tough to keep Jayden Bogle. That is the reality.
I'll heavily miss him.
Mate, it'd be horrendous. For me, if we sold Jayden Bogle for anything less than 30, I think it'd be a bad move.
Yeah, very bad. Especially
I genuinely think that's a 35 mil fullback.
Especially if you've got the likes of, Liverpool on the horizon and all this sort of stuff, and even Everton, and teams like that, you literally have to sell him. And you're in the Premier League as well, aren't you? So you're not getting relegated, and therefore his stock is diminishing. You are in the Premier League, so you can effectively charge. And you look at the premiums that people get sold for nowadays, and I think he can be, if you to really get that negotiation nailed, you can quantify him anyway as a right winger as well. So he can be utilising that offensive standpoint as well, which obviously people going forward, sell for more money.
Physical qualities too. In terms of the speed, absolutely rapid. Jayden Bogle, it's a speed element to him. So you think that the elite teams will always push the fullbacks very high at the pitch, like we do, but we do it with wing backs. Liverpool especially. You see how high they push their fullbacks. That speed element with Jayden Bogle, I think, would definitely attract a big six team.
Well, I wanted to get your reaction anyway. Forest have just beaten Fenerbahce away 3-0. Yeah, it's a good win, isn't it? Morgan Gibbs.
Yeah,
Gibbs White on the score sheet. Gibbs White getting an assist for Igor Jesus, and Murillo coming back to score. Do you think Europe has some impact on? I mean, look, we talk about the FA Cup, don't we? And I was making look, I'm talking about mentality here. I'm not talking about picking up injuries and all this sort of stuff. But so to put that to the side. But in terms of confidence and mentality, going away to Fenerbahce is only going to increase your confidence, isn't it?
Yeah, compared to where it was at, certainly with Gibbs White, he came off after an hour against us. Forest were 3-0 down, and they thought Ryan Yates would be a better option off the bench than Morgan Gibbs White, which I think is crazy. It kind of shows where they were at as a team. And we've kind of seen this last season with Vitor Pereira at Wolves, sort of taking over a similar situation and instantly getting results. You kind of see he platforms Cunha and Strand Larsen, really well. You kind of think, will he do a similar thing with Gibbs White and, say Hudson-Odoi, for example, or, whoever it is, will he profile them in a similar way? There's definitely a case for that. And you look at Forest's team in general, Anderson, Sangare, and Morgan Gibbs White is not a relegation level midfield. It's a top 10 level midfield for me.
Yeah.
You could put that midfield in the Everton team, and Everton would improve as a team. There's no question about it for me.
It's a much better midfield than Everton's.
It is, yeah. That's what I mean. There's teams in that top 10 who've just not got, even Bournemouth, you can kind of say, in parts of their midfield, have not got as good a midfield as that. So, it always felt to me, Forest, as long as they've got the confidence back, they'll probably will have some kind of bounce back.
What do Leeds need to do for you? Just straight answer. I mean, is it 3 more wins? Is it 4 more wins? What's the points total you think Leeds need to get to with West Ham improving? A follow-on to that is as well, do you think this is just a spike for West Ham, or do you think it's going to be a continuum? And Nottingham Forest, obviously, do you think it's going to be a gradual increase as well? Because I think we all know, I think anyway, Spurs are going to get out of it, and Brighton.
Yeah, I'll start with Leeds. I think the absolute safety is, I'd say 4 more wins. I think that probably, you'd have to be ridiculous. I mean, you'd have to literally lose all the other games for that not to be enough, at that point. 41 or more points surely should be. I think, are we on 20? Oh, no, we're on 30, aren't we now? Yeah. So 42 or more points, should be.
With a healthy goal difference.
Goal difference in a decent state. You look at the games left, you sent me that fixture difficulty rater the other day. We're bottom of that. We've got in theory, the easiest fixtures between now and the end of the season. You'd like to think we can keep that goal difference. Even if we lose a couple of games we shouldn't do, we'll keep that goal difference in a fairly decent state. We won't be losing games 3 or 4-0. We'll be losing 1-0 if we have to lose games, if that makes sense. So you'd have to hope we keep that in sync. In terms of West Ham, Yeah, it's a difficult one with West Ham because I think they were near the top of the fixture difficulty, which is quite a big thing. Somerville has been a big part of that recovery. You're thinking, could Somerville maintain 6 goals in 7 games? There probably will be, a bit of a. I'm not saying Somerville will go back to the form before that. I think
It's
he
a
will.
tough game from this weekend, isn't it? Bournemouth at home. That's no easy.
Yeah, exactly. It'll be
Game.
interesting, in terms of how that plays out, in terms of Bournemouth at home. That's probably one where West Ham, in the position they're in, they've got to get something at the very least. They can't be losing that game. As good as Bournemouth are, I think that Bournemouth for a team could be top 7, top 8 very easily by the end of the season. But West Ham have got to be getting something in that game. But I don't see enough players standing up outside of Somerville. I think the defence has still got problems. I think Bowen's still struggling with form. Fernandez. But I think I think really in terms of
it's a finisher, and it's the finisher.
Forwards who I think influence things the most. The goals and assists, I think your forwards or your goalkeeper, or especially good performing defence, which West Ham haven't got. So I think there will be some kind of calming down at West Ham where they won't maintain what they're doing right now. I think there will be a bit of a calming down. That won't necessarily mean West Ham go down, but it also doesn't mean they're just going to blast away out of this and easily stay up. I really don't think that'll be the case. With Forest, it's really hard to say at this moment in time. You look at Forest's first game in, Liverpool at home. Not a great time to play Liverpool, I don't think. I think their performances have picked up in the league, have picked up quite a bit. Pretty crazy lost that City game, in terms of, a crazy game in general. I thought they were the better team for large spells of that one. Get a good win at Sunderland as well. And you look at Wirtz and Ekitike, I think, can Forest realistically stop that at this moment in time? The set pieces, Van Dijk, there's a lot of ways Liverpool can hurt Forest. Forest as well, a bit like West Ham, got some very, very difficult fixtures to come up. So it's hard to say. Tottenham, you kind of alluded to there. I agree. I think Igor Tudor, I don't necessarily think is going to, suddenly get Tottenham back to the levels they were under Poch. I don't think that at all. I think there'll still be a lot of disgruntled fans, by the end of the season. But I do think, in terms of he's a more not so much more attack-minded than Thomas Frank, but I think he'll keep things simpler than Thomas Frank. And I just think player quality should probably see Tottenham through. Van de Ven stays fit. I don't really see that defence having too many big issues compared to the other teams down there. I'm personally looking at Brighton and Palace more than I am Tottenham at this moment in time.
I'm not sure about Palace.
I know points-wise they're a lot further clear, but I think losing to Burnley psychologically, and then obviously they're playing in the Conference League, I think tonight, aren't they?
Tonight, yeah.
Conference League. If they don't win that Wolves game, I think all of a sudden Palace's confidence will be in a bad place. Brighton's probably the one you look at more because they are in total freefall. Their best player, Carlos Baleba, is nowhere near at it. He looks like his head's out is looking other ways at this moment in time. Looking at potentially, obviously, Man United in the summer.
Not scoring enough goals. They're not scoring enough goals, right?
I mean, Minter isn't in the team at this moment in time. I cannot understand how you would not have Yaku Minter in the team. I really cannot see how that'd be the case.
Well, focusing. I just love this comment from Steve. Every side on their day can win, lose, and draw. Some insight there from Steve.
In any game, you're either going to win, lose, or draw.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I agree. Right, let's move on to the Villa game, mate, before we end. Sneaky, weird sort of feeling before proceedings that, we're going to maybe get something out of this game. I think then I figured out that, Matty Cash and Emi Buendia were fit as opposed to I thought they were going to be out for this one. But Boubacar Kamara's out for this one. John McGinn's out. Yuri Tielemans. And remember, in particular, Tielemans and McGinn, how massive they were in that game at Ellen Road, especially in that second half when it all kind of changed and they were absolutely central to that. So where do you put us in this one? Is it going to be another game of which Leeds kind of do the unthinkable, really, and maybe go and get a point? I don't see us winning here whatsoever, but going there and getting a point. How do you think Farke sets up? Is it going to be 10 defenders on the pitch? And is there a case for maybe going a little bit more attacking and pinning Villa back a little bit so we don't kind of have to face a barrage of Morgan Gibbs-White trying to just float through us?
Morgan Rogers.
What did I call it? Morgan Gibbs-Rogers.
Gibbs-White, yeah.
Rogers.
Morgan Gibbs-Rogers. Yeah, I mean, you can't talk about Villa without talking about Morgan Rogers. I think he's outstanding.
Match winner, isn't it? Match winner.
If I was picking the World Cup team tomorrow, there is no doubt in my mind. Whoever has to come out, Morgan Rogers is in that team for me. Yeah. It's starting 11. I just think he's so reliable. He's he's a fantastic footballer for me. I think Villa will have a problem keeping Morgan Rogers.
You heard it
I almost did. I went for the almost started the git of the Gibbs. But yeah, they'll have a big problem keeping Rogers. There's no question about that. I think Onana's another player I really like in that Villa team. I think physicality wise, he's gonna be a really difficult player, to cut, in terms of against Stach. I think Stach and Onana will be a very interesting kind of battle. If Stach is back for this game, that's obviously a big if in itself, really.
I don't mind Louise. I don't mind Louise, but if he's obviously not in that 8 role, and if he's in a 6 next to Onana, I think that definitely favours us, to be honest.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think Onana. I look at off the ball. I think he's amazing off the ball, Onana, personally. In terms of how great he is at getting across the pitch. But Douglas Luiz, I think certainly on the ball, of course, he can find those passes into Rodgers. He can find those passes into Tammy Abraham. He's a really, really good footballer. But defensively, you kind of saw in Serie A with Juve, didn't really work for Douglas Luiz. There's certainly question marks there. You can certainly get Brendan Aronson, for example, dropping in into the pockets. Even Dominic Calvert-Lewin, sort of dropping a little bit deeper and, creating the space in behind him. There's certainly ways you can get at, Douglas Luiz in midfield. I think the back four itself isn't the best, I don't think it's the best, at this moment in time. In terms of Pau Torres, I think probably might start this game if he's back. I don't know if he is back or not, actually. Tyrone Mings might start this game. You look at, I think Konza's a good player, but I think Konza, on his own, I'm not sure is the.
Even if Cash is out, Cash was very influential, wasn't he? If Cash is out,
but defensively, I think that you can still get at Matty Cash, for example. I think going forward, Matty Cash, Luca Digne, Martson are all really good fullbacks, but defensively, you can definitely get at that. I think even Martinez himself in goal is making a lot of mistakes, this season. I think maybe even last season, you're kind of seeing a sort of degradation in his performances. But yeah, let's get it right. A point here would be a really, really good result. A competitive performance, would be something we've got to look at. I think the last 2 games, as much as I think Forest is our level, I've kind of already said it. We've got to make sure it's not like Chelsea and it's an onslaught. We can't, that Chelsea game.
We'll just get battered.
That Chelsea game was 1 in 100 chance of us getting a point there, and we got that 1% on the. We can't play like that again.
And playing like that from what reading between the lines is having really no ambition and sitting in a low block. Is that what?
Yeah, I think that's risky. I don't. Yeah. I think it's more. It's supposed to be risk averse, but I think it's more risky.
We can't do it. We can't. We've done it against nigh on pretty much every single team, barring Wolves in the Premier League away from home. We've sat in a low block, and we've been, maybe aside from Newcastle, I'd say that we're a little bit more progressive. But aside from that, we've sat in low block, and away from home, we've conceded an average of 2 goals per game.
It's not working.
That does not work for Leeds United, which is.
And if you give Morgan Rogers space, you're going to have big problems. Rogers, left wing, right wing, number 10.
Palmer, didn't you? Just sort of Cole Palmer.
It'll be the same thing.
Picking up those sort of half spaces in front of the midfield and. Behind the midfield.
And then you're allowing Onana and Douglas Luiz to push up the pitch, become more influential, completely just keep Villa pinned high up the pitch kind of thing. That is not what, keeping us pinned and Villa high up the pitch, Cash and Digne overlapping. Eventually you'll concede. They've got the quality to hit the ball from distance if needed. They will find moments, set pieces as well. It's an Unai Emery team. They do always tend to find a way in games. Even if they're not playing well, they tend to find a way. And you certainly don't want to give them any more of a helping hand. So I would like to see us, be adventurous if we can. Personally, I would play Dominic Calvert-Lewin and Mecha up front. I really would try and split the Villa centre-backs and try and get, Mecha in that sort of left-hand channel, not quite as a winger, but more as a striker, and just give Cash something to think about, to the side of him. Give, Konza something to think about to the side of him. I think Calvert-Lewin can win that aerial duel against any of Villa's centre-backs. I think Calvert-Lewin can bully. I really do believe that. And I think you can get Bogle and Goodmanson high up the pitch and getting balls into the box. And then if you have Stach playing box-to-box, if Stach's fit, if Stach's not fit, go with Brendan Aronson. And then have just Gruev and Ampadu, sitting in front of that. It is still quite defensive in nature, but the intent is a bit different. If you go with 2 up front, you then kind of have that option to go long. Without Pascal Strout, you have that option to go long into Dominic Calvert-Lewin and Mecha and get at Villa in that kind of sense. I think one thing Villa don't have to have high levels of possession to win games. So, if it is a case of we maybe do have to drop deep at times. I don't mind that per se, because I think Villa prefer having open space to run into. But you also don't want to be too extreme where you're just sitting off for 90 minutes and then eventually Rodgers will find that space. Rodgers finds a space. 9 out of 10 times he will make something happen. So it's an awkward game to prepare for Villa, because they're so different to the other teams in that top 6, top 7, because they don't really play with wingers. We kind of mentioned Buendia. Buendia on paper is a left winger or a 10 in this Villa team, but in reality, they play with loads of 10s. In terms of Rodgers is a number 10 for me. Buendia is a number 10 for me.
Matty Cash can sometimes be a 10.
Yeah, exactly. So it's going to be difficult to, I think that midfield's got to be quite secure. I think it's obviously Stach, Rev, Ampadu is quite a defensive midfield. I do appreciate that. But I think if you get Stach playing box to box and involved, I think you can cause problems for Onana and Douglas Luiz from that point of view. But whatever we do, Villa have got, in almost every position on the pitch, have probably got the better quality, if we're being totally honest.
Probably.
I mean, Calvert-Lewin for me was probably starting this Villa team on current form. I do genuinely believe that. And I really like Tammy Abraham as well. I think Tammy Abraham's a very underrated player. But yeah, I think other than that, I'm push. Yeah, maybe the centre backs. Maybe Biol Rodon could maybe get in alongside Konza. I do think, but other than that,
well, let's just get Dino just quickly. Oscar, if Farke keeps Leeds up this season, do you have faith in him to get it right in the summer for transfers and keep them up next season?
Yeah, I think so. I think in terms of the system we're playing at this moment in time, I think a lot of it, a lot could happen between now and the summer. If we win like the next 3 or 4 games, we probably would be safe. And then you win the next 3 or 4 games and then lose 9 of the next 10. And then, all of a sudden the signs aren't too good and you maybe have to reassess it. So it just depends. What we feel now in February could be very different to what we feel in May. But right now, we're on a great run. I think we've been a mid-table Premier League team since November. It's not just a couple of games. This is now sort of a third of the season. We're being very competitive, looking like a team that can easily stay up. You got to look at it from that point of view. And you have to remember, Farke didn't get what he wanted in January either. So, I think he has earned that chance again. Personally, right here, right now, I'd say he has.
Definitely. Guys, we are going to leave it there. Do us a favor before you leave. Make sure you slap the likes. There's not enough on here. You lot can do better than that. It's been an hour of free content, so do us a favor. Hit that like button. It's absolutely free. Oscar, score predictions, mate, for the game. What are you thinking?
I'll go 1-1.
Good.
That's quite. I do have something of a good feeling on this. I think
I do. I think it's. Do you know what it is? It's a good time to play them. They've got 3 of the key players out, and I can't just help revisiting nostalgia. And what I mean by that is the fact that every time we've played up against Aston Villa at Villa Park, we've had an inferior team, and we've got a half decent record there over the last 5 years. So
yeah.
At
the end of the game we did lose. I think the 2-1. Jesse Marsh's. 2022, 2023, we dominated the game. We genuinely did.
It's just somehow having a plan for Morgan Rodgers in it. I think that's having a plan for him. But right, mate, we will leave it there. Guys, thank you so much. Leave us comments in the section below as well after the video. Leave your thoughts in there about Buonanotte, about Jaden Bogle leaving, the Villa game, the Forest European venture, and if that's going to spur them on to greater things, and ultimately who you think's gonna get relegated from the Premier League, and hopefully you've got Leeds staying up. It's been an absolute pleasure. We will see you at the same time next week. See you in a bit.